Good evening. My name is Dan Wilson with One Community in Stamford. And the members of the Lower Fairfield County Immigration Collaborative are very pleased to host this roundtable tonight. And our topic, the outlook for immigration policy, could not be more timely. For all of us who work with the immigrant communities and practice immigration law in Fairfield County, the past 4 years have seen an unending torrent of restrictive immigration policies. Even after the election, the outgoing administration continues to announce new regulations, policies, and rulings almost daily that threaten the well-being and futures of immigrant families here and across the nation. We have two excellent speakers from Washington, Jill Marie Bussey and Aaron Reichlin-Melnick. They're true experts, advocates, and opinion leaders across multiple areas of immigration law. I'm looking forward to their perspectives on what the future holds. We have three other members of the panel from Connecticut organizations who will make their introductions in a second. And I would also be, this is a round table. And I encourage all of you to write your questions so that we can, excuse me, this is going ahead of me. And we will try to take all of the questions that are being posed. We've had some questions that have been sent in by email as well. And we will try to address those as well. The organizations that are here tonight, and my computer is acting up and I apologize for that, are all in the front lines here in Connecticut. I'm going to change how I'm showing this. I'm sorry. And are all in the front lines of working with the immigrant communities across many different program areas. And, but all of our panelists tonight are specifically working in immigration legal services. And since we're amongst lawyers, I would be remiss in not saying that the views and opinions expressed here are those of the individual speakers and not necessarily of their respective organizations. I'm going to ask each of my colleagues to say a few words of introduction about their organizations, and then we'll introduce our speakers. I'm first going to pass the mic to Alicia Kinsman of SERI. I'm very proud to say that Alicia was my first teacher of immigration law and my inspiration to find a new career working with the immigrant community. So Alicia, if you could say a few words.
Sure, thanks, Dan. So my name is Alicia Kinsman. I am a senior staff attorney at the Connecticut Institute for Refugees and Immigrants. SERI, we've been around for over 100 years, providing a robust array of both social and legal services to immigrants, refugees, asylum seekers, new Americans, and their families residing here in Connecticut. We have offices in Stamford, Bridgeport, Hartford, and Waterbury, and serve thousands of individuals out of each of those offices every year. We're so happy to be part of the Lower Fairfield County Immigration Coalition and the meaningful work that the coalition has done and will continue to do, and really excited to hear more from all of our panelists, Jill and Aaron, on behalf of SERI as well. Thank you so much for agreeing to participate in such a timely event. With that, I'm going to hand it over to my colleague, Adriana, to talk about building one community.
Yes, good evening. My name is Adriana Podesta. Thank you, everybody, for being here. And this promises to be a very interesting presentation from Washington, and contributions from other panelists. So I am the Director of Immigration Legal Services at Building One Community. We are located in Stanford, but serve the immigrant community in the area of Fairfield County and sometimes beyond. In immigration, we serve mostly immigrants in need of family-based applications and humanitarian visas, like VAWAs and U visas and asylum seekers if in a limited way, and other immigration services they may need. But the center also provides services to families and individuals in support of forms and other social services, also workforce development and language and naturalization classes. The idea is to integrate immigrants into the community. So.
Peter?
Yep. Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining us. My name is Peter Maloney. I'm a director on the board of Catholic Charities of Fairfield County, which operates within the Diocese of Bridgeport. Like Siri, we're an old organization, 100 years old, more than 100 years old, founded in 1916, at a time when there were a lot of immigrants coming into this county itself to work, for example, in the Bridgeport munition facilities. And they obviously remained here. And when the war ended in World War I, a lot of those folks wound up dealing with a lot of unemployment issues, family crisis issues, housing issues, and it's it's an analogy to today's suffering amongst communities due to the COVID recession that's going on. We have over 30 programs throughout the county. You may know some of them operating under the Catholic Charities masthead. Like our own Immigration and Legal Services program. Others have their own unique names, but you would know them in the larger cities. For example, the Thomas Merton Center in Bridgeport, Room to Grow Childcare in Norwalk, and New Covenant Center in Stamford. We service all types of people, many immigrants, so we're very attuned to the issues that they're facing. Our own Immigration Legal Services program was started in 2006 to do DACA applications, citizenship applications, temporary protected status applications, and has been run out of Bridgeport during that time. And we recently opened up an operation within our Norwalk office, which was a great step because there was a shortage of in-person service in Norwalk. So that's been going on for about a month now, and we're very happy about that. And again, I thank you for joining us. I am now going to introduce our speakers. Jill Marie Busey is Director of Advocacy at the Catholic Legal Immigration Network, which is otherwise known as CLINIC. As a national level immigrant advocate, Jill focuses on administrative advocacy in the following key areas: access to counsel, naturalization, family-based immigration, religious immigration, and humanitarian forms of protection such as DACA, temporary protected status, and deferred enforcement departure. Jill has founded and leads ad hoc and standing coalition and campaign efforts, which have included seeking successful implementation of DACA during the Obama administration, advocating for low-income immigrant access to naturalization and other immigration benefits, promoting the use of TPS and DED as vital sources of humanitarian protection, and building capacity for nonprofit legal immigration service providers like our own Catholic Charities of Fairfield County. Prior to joining CLINIC, Jill was in private practice. The organization of which she is a director, CLINIC, was founded in 1988 by the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops, and among other things, counsels and assists the dozen of Catholic Charities units across the United States on their own immigration legal service programs. After Jill speaks, we will hear from Aaron Reichlin-Melnick. Aaron is policy counsel at the American Immigration Council, where he works on immigration court issues and the intersection of immigration law and policy. Prior to joining the council, Aaron was an Immigrant Justice Corps Fellow placed with the Legal Aid Society in New York City, representing immigrants placed in deportation proceedings. Aaron is a Georgetown law grad and earned his BA at Brandeis. Aaron is a prolific author, appearing in the Wall Street Journal and other media, and recently co-authored a paper on COVID's impact on immigrants. Aaron's organization, the American Immigration Council, was founded in 1988 by the American Immigration Law Association, or AILA. The Lower Fairfield County Immigration Collaborative includes several fine AILA lawyers, and we are proud to have them with us tonight. We'll now turn it over to Jill.
Thank you. I too am a proud AILA member and have been for many years. First and foremost, thank you, Peter and Dan and Alicia and Adriana, for inviting me here. I'm very grateful to be with you, particularly in this time following the election. As a national leader and top strategist in administrative advocacy, Clinic is what we see as a first responder to immigration law and policy changes. During this administration, we have fought on multiple fronts to protect immigrant rights, while in previous administrations, and what we hope to do in the upcoming administration is to work more hand in hand, side by side with the government to build structures that offer welcome, safety, security, and family unity to those who are seeking to make the United States their home. While we're grateful and relieved by the upcoming changes in leadership, I don't think it can be emphasized enough that our country's immigration system has been devastated by the Trump administration. For the past 4 years, Clinic, our network partners, and many of you have been fighting hard against the administration and the xenophobia that has infiltrated and weaponized key agencies. We're so inspired by the courage of so many who were during this time who were able, willing to speak truth to power and fight the plethora of immigration law and policy changes that have separated families, put lives at risk, have sent message to immigrants that here and abroad that they are not welcome, and has cast a shroud over America's bright beacon of hope. That means there's a tremendous amount of work ahead and very high expectations of the new administration. I'm grateful for this opportunity to talk about those expectations tonight. Clinic couldn't agree more with President-elect Biden when he said, immigration is central to who we are as a nation. Thus, we, like you, are probably amongst those with these very high expectations. At Clinic, we have a depth and breadth of subject matter expertise, like what I've heard here, in many immigration policy areas. You can find a full list of our administrative advocacy priorities for this previous year and the upcoming year, 2021, on our website at cliniclegal.org/advocacy. You'll see it's a very long list this for 2021, but I wanted to highlight just a few. From day one, Clinic plans to call on the administration to set into place a plan to restore, rebuild, and improve the Department of Justice, the Department of State, and the Department of Homeland Security, and its component agencies, including USCIS, ICE, and CBP. This will take time and resources, but we are confident with smartly chosen leadership and the expertise of stakeholders like you, it can be done. Also on day one, the administration will need to address the immediate and urgent needs of over 1 million Dreamers, temporary protected status or TPS holders, and Liberians who are transitioning from deferred enforced departure or DED. My co-panelist Aaron is going to speak more about DACA, so I thought I would focus on TPS and protections for Liberians. Pardon me. So Clinic has been a leader on this issue in both advocacy and litigation. Our network represents tens of thousands of TPS holders and their family members. Despite our nation's commitment to, under the law, to provide temporary protection, the Trump administration attempted to end such protection for hundreds of thousands of TPS holders and failed to extend TPS to other populations who were in dire need of this life-saving protection. Given the dire consequences for both these populations and the countries, we will urge the Biden administration to designate DED on day one for 17 countries. And that list is long, and I'm happy to share with you the full list as requested. With respect to Liberians, pardon me, Clinic has worked closely with partners in communities across the United States to ensure the Liberian immigrant community is protected and receives status under the Liberian Refugee Immigration Fairness Act, or LRIF. On January 10th, 2021, that's 10 days before the inauguration, thousands of Liberians in the United States will fall out of status and risk deportation and family separation due to the Trump administration's flawed implementation of the program, LRIF, compounded by, of course, COVID-19, which of course exacerbates all of the issues that we're talking about tonight. Clinic will be urging the Biden administration to designate DED again for Liberia on day one to restore protection to this vulnerable population, and then work with Congress to reopen and fix the vital program, which is LRIF. Another key issue area that is important to Clinic, our network organizations that support aspiring new Americans, is access to naturalization. Under the Trump administration, we've seen a myriad of efforts to create new and insurmountable barriers to naturalization, particularly for low-income individuals and people with disabilities, all while backlogs deepen and processing times extended to historic rates, which again has been exacerbated by the pandemic. Key policy changes have included significant changes to fee waivers, changes in the disability waiver, significant increases in filing fees, and recently, just last Friday, the release of a new citizenship test. This is in addition, of course, to the establishment of a denaturalization task force, which of course has a chilling effect on the community. Clinic firmly believes that citizenship, with all of its rights and responsibilities, should be available, accessible to all people, not just the elite, well-educated and able-bodied in a free and democratic society. We hope you will join us in our efforts to work with the Biden administration in rolling back these harmful policies and work with members of Congress who can provide USCIS with additional resources to dig out from the backlogs and restore confidence in our system by reducing processing times. We would like to see a dramatic expansion of the Citizenship and Integration Grant Program to build capacity and expand services. This is all quite doable since the infrastructure is already there. I mentioned the pandemic. It has been particularly distressing to see how the pandemic and our nation's failed response, resulting in economic recession, has laid bare so many inequities in our society. While the federal government provided relief via the CARES Act, the act imposed a social security number requirement that excludes many taxpaying immigrants and mixed status families from receiving the stimulus payment. The exclusion of undocumented individuals who pay taxes also meant, I believe, 3.5 million children nationwide, most of whom are US citizens, were excluded from this essential relief. Additionally, expanded employment insurance programs don't include support for undocumented workers. We will fight with our partners at the Conference of Catholic Bishops for this next round of relief to offer opportunity to right the injustice of excluding immigrants and mixed status families. We've seen in Connecticut, and we would love to hear more from you all, we applaud the efforts at the state level to provide relief funds for the approximately, I believe it's 120,000 undocumented immigrants living in Connecticut. However, when we look at the amount of assistance broken down per person, it seems insufficient. So I'm really eager tonight to hear about the Fairfield County COVID-19 Resiliency Fund and other efforts in Connecticut that we could support or help other communities, things that are working in your community and in your state that we may help to work in other states and use as a benchmark, and for other states that are looking to provide support to undocumented and mixed status families. And with that, I'll pass it off to the next, to Erin, I guess.
Thank you very much for that, and a really excellent presentation. And thank you to everyone who's involved with this and for inviting me to this wonderful presentation and to be given the opportunity to talk. At the American Immigration Council, one of the things that we work on is educating the public in matters of immigration policy, and so that people can understand what is going on, as well as advocating for a fair system for all immigrants through the use of public advocacy and litigation, as well as helping in one of our works connect immigrants to lawyers in certain circumstances. So I'm here today, however, to talk about immigration policy and some of the things that we've seen under the Trump administration that we expect to change under the Biden administration. In particular, I want to focus on 4 areas. The public charge rule, which many of you know something about, which I'll explain a little bit more on. What's happening now with DACA and the Dreamers, asylum and refugee issues, and then finally, I want to talk a little bit about the speed at which we expect some of these changes to happen. Starting with public charge, as many of you may know, the public charge rule is a rule that the Trump administration put into place earlier this year after having initially proposed it in 2018 and passed it into a regulation in 2019. It is a regulation in which the Trump administration imposes effectively a wealth test on new immigrants to the United States who are seeking a green card. Under this public charge rule, immigrants had to show that it was not likely that they might use any form of state and government benefits or specific types of state and government benefits. For instance, food stamps, Section 8 housing, or Medicare. Now, importantly, while the concept of public charge has existed in America's immigration law for more than a century, this administration proposed to expand that concept to something it had never before been, where even using $1 of food stamps could get you denied a work permit. Now, many people were put in fear by this rule, and unfortunately, there's been a lot of misinformation about what the rule actually did. Many people stopped going to hospitals or taking advantage of benefits that would not affect their immigration status, including, we know, some people who already had green cards or individuals who were already citizens or were certainly only seeking benefits for their US citizen children. While the rule is narrower than that and doesn't block it, that chilling effect on people's use of benefits which they were legally entitled to has been serious and has especially been serious during the pandemic. There's been a lot of back and forth in the courts, but the most important thing to know about the public charge rule under the Biden administration is that Biden has promised to get rid of the public charge rule and restore the situation to what it was before earlier this year when the rule went into effect. And hopefully we'll be able to make some positive change. That means that those of you who have fear about the public charge rule, how it might affect your immigration status or the immigration status of a friend or a relative or somebody that you know, should know that the Biden administration has promised to get rid of this rule as one of the first things that they want to do in office. And turning to DACA and the Dreamers. Now, there are at this point around 700,000 people who received deferred action for childhood arrivals, or DACA, under the Obama administration. The people who were eligible for DACA were people who had graduated from school here in the United States, who were brought here as children under the age of 15, who had no serious criminal records, and who had been here for at least 5 years. So been here between 2007 and 2012. Now, we often think of Dreamers and people with DACA as children, but these days, DACA has been around now for 8 years, which means the oldest DACA recipient now is potentially 38 years old. So these are people who have built lives in their communities, who have been working legally for 8 years. Many of them have US citizen children. Many of them are small business owners. They're doctors, they're teachers. Some of them are lawyers. And these are people who have made their lives in the United States and who are part of the American community. And unfortunately, the Trump administration tried to kill this program, but thanks to some errors that they made in the process of killing it, the Supreme Court held that they had gone about it the wrong way and blocked them from ending the DACA program. President-elect Biden has promised that one of his first measures that he's going to do on taking office is to immediately restore DACA to the state that it was before the Trump administration started trying to meddle with it. However, for various reasons, we're going to need to go further than that. And he has promised to send a bill to Congress to try to get a permanent form of relief for people who were brought here as children that would give them a pathway to status and not a temporary, potentially removable status that another president could make a political football and political hot potato and change in a future administration. Because I think we all know it's time for Congress to actually step in and do something here. And the president is going to have to look at various options that he can do to ensure that people who have DACA status, as well as all of those people who have been blocked from getting DACA since 2017 by the Trump administration, have an opportunity to come out of the shadows or stay in their current positions where they are and continue to contribute to this country. Now, on asylum and refugee issues, that is where we are likely to see the biggest change between the Trump administration and a new Biden administration. The Trump administration has been singularly hateful towards asylum and refugee status. When the Trump administration took control, President Obama had set the number of refugees that could be allowed into this country at 110,000. He slashed it first to 50,000, then to 45,000, then to 30,000. And this year he set the refugee level at just 18,000 people, even though we are in a worldwide refugee crisis and the number of displaced persons is at the highest it has ever been in recorded history. President-elect Biden has promised already that one of his first acts on taking office would be to raise the refugee ceiling to allow in 125,000 refugees in next year. And we expect that that's a level that he would be willing to keep and potentially raise over the next 4 years. And importantly, while that number may seem high, we have actually accepted much higher numbers in the past. In the 1980s, we actually accepted more than 200,000 people a year, and sometimes many of these refugees from Vietnam or other countries that were going through serious crises. And that we came together as a country to accept these people as refugees, and they built strong communities in the United States. Many of them now are citizens, their children have been here for decades. And we have seen in many ways how refugee admissions have helped revitalize a lot of small cities, and they've helped to build stronger communities and built their lives here in the United States. In addition, the Biden administration has already promised to reverse a number of the Trump administration's most harmful policies at the border, ones that have targeted families and children seeking asylum. 65,000 people were sent to Mexico under the so-called migrant protection protocols, a program in which families, children, and adults seeking asylum were forced into refugee camps and temporary shelters in Mexico while they waited for court hearings where they were almost certainly going to be denied asylum. President-elect Biden has promised to end this sham process, though the actual logistics of doing it may be a little tricky, but we know that this is something that we are going to focus on. In addition, he has promised a select committee to investigate family separation because there still remain over 600 children who have not been able to contact their parents, whose parents don't even know where they are, who were separated by this administration in 2018 and 2017. And there's been a promised investigation to get to the bottom and make sure that these parents can reunite. Now, while you may have heard from this administration say some parents chose not to reunite, but the reality is that this administration offered parents a choice in many circumstances. You can reunite with your child as long as you agree that your child gets deported from the United States and has to go back to whatever harm they were fleeing. Now, we are going to push the Biden administration and say that's not enough. If you want to reunite parents, you have to allow those parents to come here to the United States and have the opportunity to seek asylum that they were denied the first time. Of course, if my druthers, any parent who'd been separated from their child should be just handed a green card, because when you harm a family, a child like that, you need to give them something in compensation for the enormous damage that you've done to them. And we owe them more than just another chance to go in front of a judge. And I hope that the Biden administration accepts that and as it moves forward. Now, how likely is all of this to happen? Well, there's more than 400 changes, according to the Migration Policy Institute, that have occurred in the field of immigration. And Jill talked about a number of them, and I've talked about others, but I could sit here for hours talking about everything that's happened in immigration. So we can expect some of these things, like the travel bans, like the refugee numbers, like DACA, are things that can be done on day one. Because importantly, as much as President Trump did on immigration, he did it only through the executive branch, through his own presidential actions. Congress, actually, with the exception of protections for Liberians that were mentioned earlier, has done nothing on immigration for the past 4 years. So that means that what one president did, another president can overturn. Some things may take a while, but things like public charge, for instance, if the Biden administration simply dropped its appeals of various lawsuits against the public charge rule, that's something that could be overturned quickly, because courts have already ruled that that public charge rule is illegal. And the only reason that it hasn't been stopped already is because the Trump administration is appealing it. With a new administration, if they just drop that appeal, that means that the public charge rule goes away quickly. Other changes, including providing compensation to parents for what happened to them during family separation, that is going to take a little bit of time. And unfortunately, what's going to matter most is political will, is us making sure of advocates like everyone here is holding the new administration to its promises. So far, they have promised a lot, and we want to make sure that they deliver. So when you're looking forward to changes from the administration, you should expect a lot of things to happen in the first 100 days. But other things may simply take time. And even the best intentioned people know that it's going to take a little while to overturn all of these policies. So I think you'll expect to see a lot of things happening quickly, and then a bunch of new things changing in the months that follow. But I think everybody here would agree, none of us want to just return to the status quo that it was in 2016. We want to move forward and make positive change that improves the lives of immigrants and the United States at the same time. And with that, thank you all. I'm going to turn it over for Q&A. Or whoever's next, sorry.
Hi. This is Pete Maloney here. I just have a few questions that came up, or which I held in abeyance. Am I clear that we can expect all TPS status to be restored to what it was, or will the administration sort of look at them one by one? There's a large number of Salvadoran, Honduran, and Haitian TPS recipients in the county, in the community here with us, and they'd be interested in understanding whether TPS is going to come back for everybody, or is it just going to be on a one-off basis, looking at each status?
The reason why we're advocating for DED, Deferred Enforced Departure, which operates to the applicant or to the person who's receiving it, they're conferred pretty much the same protections, protection from deportation, as well as the opportunity for work authorization. But the reason why we're advocating for DED for all of the TPS populations who have previously held TPS, including those who were Ebola-stricken countries that they lost TPS very early in the Trump administration, and those who were not conferred TPS status and should have been. The reason why we're advocating for DED is because it's a much more administratively, let's say, easier way, more efficient way for the administration to provide blanket protection without people having to automatically have to gather the funds for re-registration or registration under a new TPS grant. As we mentioned, I think Aaron and I have talked about, the U.S. Immigration Service is already incredibly backlogged and filled with applications they have not been able to process yet, and taken the money of TPS holders who are still waiting for their work authorization and their EADs to be printed, right? What we don't want to do is create a system that breaks USCIS further. So DED is a way to provide blanket protection through the issuance of, and it's issued by the president, and it would provide that immediate protection for from deportation and the work authorization people need. But we're also advocating for the proper use of temporary protected status. And that would be something that could be, DED could be conferred immediately, and down the road, there could be new designations of TPS, which would seek to cover those who were already here and covered by TPS before the Trump administration terminated TPS for El Salvador, for Haiti, for many of these, Honduras, Nicaragua, the list goes on, Nepal, but also to cover more recent arrivals. That's called the redesignation process. So we're looking at the use of both of these tools that the administration can use to provide the most generous blanket protection for those who are deserving, obviously, of the protection, who need the work authorization to sustain themselves in the United States, until the next step, obviously, is, because this is not the end game, until there can be a legislative solution that provides a pathway to citizenship, permanent protection for individuals, so they don't have to continue to be on this roller coaster of waiting for an administration to extend or not TPS, right? What we really want to do is provide folks who are well rooted in our communities, who are contributing to our communities, who have their families here, and to give them a pathway to citizenship. I hope that's responsive.
Yeah. Aaron, anything on that?
No, I think the only thing I would add is it's important to note, of course, that no TPS designations expire before the new administration takes over. So no one who currently has TPS should see their status change before a new administration takes over. Okay.
Now, I had a question for you both on the future of ICE. I also saw there was a question in the Q&A about the status of sanctuary cities, which may go away, but and Connecticut, as you know, has been pretty benign compared to some other states in terms of ICE activity. But what do you see nationally as the future of ICE enforcement? And what happens to the people that have been detained, that are sitting in detention right now, on January 22nd? What happens to them?
Yeah, so that's a great question. On sanctuary cities, we have actually seen under the Trump administration, partially in response to the anti-immigrant rhetoric, more states and local governments and cities adopt sanctuary policies than ever have before. Now, importantly, you have to know that a sanctuary policy doesn't mean somebody cannot be arrested by ICE or that somebody is somehow protected from deportation. It just means that the city has agreed that it's not going to use its own resources to support the federal government's efforts to deport members of the community. While ICE can therefore go into the community and do its own arrests, it doesn't get the help of the city. And so no one is necessarily protected from deportation by being in a sanctuary city, as much as the Trump administration has tried to claim falsely that that's somehow true. I think that we should see continued support for sanctuary policies in the future, even in an administration which is more friendly to immigrants. Sanctuary cities studies have shown over and over again that sanctuary policies either don't affect crime rates or actually lower crime rates and make cities safer, cities and counties safer. And I think some cities see that it's better to have the support and the trust of the local immigrant community regardless of immigration status. And I think you'll see more of that going forward. For those who are in immigration detention, the Biden administration has promised to institute a 100-day deportation moratorium under which that they will not deport anybody while they undo all of the harmful policies of this administration, including policies like targeting people for deportation who have no criminal record, who have been here for decades, and who have US citizen children, and a lot of strong reasons to allow them to have a second chance to remain here in the United States. So we don't know exactly how this moratorium is going to work for people in detention, but we would hope that in the midst of a pandemic, a new administration chooses to immediately release as many people as possible from detention, because right now there are still at least 17,000 people nationwide who are locked in ICE detention centers around the country, many of whom have no criminal record, who have been members of the community for a very long time, and some of whom simply arrived at our border to seek asylum. So we would hope that ICE significantly reduces the number of people it has in detention under a new administration, but that's something that we expect to have to push for quite strongly.
I would add to that that the one of the first actions that the Trump administration took was an executive action, which essentially stripped away the enforcement priorities that the Obama administration had put in place, which was a way of reserving resources for enforcement to those that the administration deemed to be more higher risk. And so by taking away the enforcement priorities, essentially everyone became a priority. We would hope, and we are calling on the Biden administration to sign a new executive order. And this goes to how quickly things can happen, right? Some things are going to have to go through the regulatory process, and that's going to be a little slow. Some things can be done by executive order and policy memo change relatively quickly. What we're calling on the Biden administration to do is to sign a new executive order, which would rescind the Trump directives that prioritize essentially most immigrants. What we think is likely to happen is the Biden administration would revert back and reinstitute the Obama priorities, which targets immigrants with criminal records, which we hope would only be, if it is done, would be a temporary measure before there can be a firm review of that policy and the soundness of that policy. As we know, there are communities that are over-policed and caught up in criminal systems, Black immigrants in particular, who are subject to over-policing. And so there is a disparate impact on certain communities who have criminal records as a result. We'll put it that way. And we would truly hope that the Biden administration would immediately avoid and put out a directive to avoid collateral arrests, which has been an uptick under the Trump administration, which essentially, if you're by proxy near somebody, right, in the same house, even though you're not the targeted person for enforcement, then you're getting swept up and put into this deportation machinery. And that's what we would hope. But really, we would hope that the Biden administration, I think this is what Aaron and I were talking about, we don't want to just go back and revert to former policy. And this is one area where we would really hope that the Biden administration would take a new and fresh view at those enforcement priorities and what is the baseline, what are we setting them on, what values are we utilizing to set those enforcement priorities.
Right. All right. I'm gonna ask Alicia to take on the Q&A portion now and generate some of the questions that have come in.
Sorry, sure, absolutely. There was one that just recently came in that I think, Aaron, you were going to address, and that is, would the moratorium that you all were just discussing apply to people not in detention, but rather reporting monthly to ICE, maybe on an order of supervision, who still face the threat of imminent deportation?
I think the answer to that is yes. Though, of course, we haven't seen this moratorium, but post-election, this moratorium was included in the pre-election plans, and it has been confirmed to reporters, though it's not current. They're still building their transition website, and they don't have an immigration section of the website yet. So we haven't seen it officially post-election, but it has apparently been reconfirmed to reporters at CBS News that there will be a total moratorium on deportations, though we do not know yet whether there will be any exceptions. But it should definitely apply to people who are checking in with ICE under the threat of imminent deportation.
Thank you. There's another one here, and maybe even Adriana, you might be able to respond to this one, which is, if US citizen children receive food stamps, does that affect the immigration, or would it affect the immigration options of their undocumented parents? So going back to the public charge rule.
Yes, I guess they're referring about the new public charge rule, which is the one that is more dangerous. And even in that case, the receipt of benefits by a US citizen child would not affect the parent. It is only if the person, him or herself, is receiving or has received the benefit. So it is perfectly fine for a child to get what he or she deserves.
And I was like, that applies to all forms of benefits. So not just food stamps.
No, any benefit. Any benefit is only reserved to the applicant to be a permanent resident, applicant for admission, not the US citizen child or anybody else in the house.
Thanks, Adriana. So there's another question here that is addressing the zero tolerance policy under the Trump administration and the children that were separated from their families. And the question from Deborah Cohen is a plan to find the families of the children, the 644 children, specifically in development, I'm guessing under the Biden administration? I don't know if Jill.
I would say, so basically this is they have supposedly said that there is a plan to do this. It is important to distinguish sort of what's happening with these. So these are, what's happening in these circumstances are, these are children these are parents of children who were separated. The children are in the United States currently, usually living with family members or other people who sponsored them, who have been released from government custody, some of whom who may have already been able to gain some form of permanent status or who may still be going through the immigration court process. And their parents were deported back to their home countries without their children. There is currently an effort, but it's funded by nonprofits. The government is not really supporting it, to find these parents and allow them to have an option to choose to reunify with their children. But as I think I mentioned before, some parents have turned that reunification down because reunification means having their children deported. So some parents have said, even though I haven't seen my child in 3 years, I don't want my child sent back to my home country, where the same place I fled. So we would hope that a new administration not only promises to spend money and support to find those parents, but promises to give those parents a chance to come to the United States rather than force them to choose again between having their children in safety in the United States or having their children with them in their home countries not in safety.
I have another question here from Monica, which is a 3-part question. So maybe I'll just start with the first part and then move forward, because I think it is a great question. And it's this: the Biden administration will be quite overwhelmed by COVID management and reverting the economic downturn. So the first part of the question is it realistic that the Biden administration has the sufficient bandwidth to undo the damages done by Trump?
I would say yes. We as a nation should be able to walk and chew gum at the same time. And I know that's oversimplistic, but this is a large federal government. And we should be able to handle pandemic as well as be humanitarian, return humanity to our immigration system. There are literally hundreds of people, probably thousands of advocates, who would rush through the door right now if Biden were here to say, let me help you. I have this expertise. I want to help you to restore order and justice. If you look at the list of the transition team that has been chosen for Department of Homeland Security and other agencies that, like the Department of Justice, that also administer immigration benefits or have a hand in the immigration system, there have been some very smartly chosen individuals in that transition team who will help this administration. It is not just saying, Biden and Harris alone. We're talking about huge teams of individuals who are deeply committed. And if you look at the backgrounds and biographies of some of the individuals who are already on transition team, have been chosen for a transition team, who they're looking at for potentially holding cabinet level offices, you're looking at a depth of experience for these individuals. They will bring that to bear, and this can be done, and it should be done. And if we give this administration the pass of saying, oh, we understand that COVID relief, it should be the top priority, we'll wait for immigration, we will do ourselves, everyone a disservice. They should be able to make good on their promises, and we should hold their feet to the fire. We are going to be part of the solution. Advocates must be part of the solution. We must restore stakeholder engagement. We must restore a government that's open and transparent. And we have to be part of the solution and part of presenting what they can do day one. We also will have to be patient. There are going to be certain things that will not be able to just turn the switch on and off. There, like I mentioned, some things can be done by executive order immediately. Some things will need to go through the regulatory process, and we're going to need advocates to engage in that regulatory process and have faith in the system again and submit comments and tell them what you told the Trump administration was wrong about that policy in the first place. We're going to need this. I'm saying this is a long game. We're going to need your beautiful minds and thoughts about how to restore order and in a new way, rebuild, transform this system. It can be done. And I don't think that COVID, while very incredibly important, obviously, I don't think that it's a binary choice.
Amen. That's a really excellent segue to another part of this question, which is, and Erin, maybe you can speak to this a little bit, which is what can be done at the state and local level in the next 12 months?
I can answer this. I think, though Jill may be better suited because she works on state and local issues. So I'm actually going to defer back to her for her expertise.
So at the state and local level, so when we were planning for electoral politics, et cetera, we were planning for one of two things. Truly the state and local, if Trump had won the election, state and local would have been the only salvation, if you will, for immigrants and their quality of life. The last barrier, if you will, of providing protection. With the Biden administration, now this presents an opportunity where states and municipalities hopefully will not be in a position of defending against retaliation, for example, for being called a sanctuary city, if you will, and can really build a partnership with the administration, which will not include, hopefully, 287G and things that require federal, or not require, but encumber local resources with federal resources. That mixture never really works out. I would hope that we would see a repudiation and a complete dismemberment of the 287G program. What I think also at the state and local level, which we're writing a paper on right now, which I think is really exciting, there's an opportunity for state and local advocates to get involved at the federal level, but using your expertise and voice, which I'm really excited about. I would love to see the expansion of the sensitive locations, a revisiting of the sensitive locations memorandum. Again, this is a memo that says ICE isn't supposed to do enforcement operations in certain places because we recognize for the public good, it's not good for ICE to go into hospitals or churches or schools to conduct enforcement actions, right? I would like to see that an opportunity for localities and states to work with the federal government to rebuild that policy and really relook at that policy, because courthouses were never included on the policy memorandum. And this is what's really impacting local communities. When people don't feel safe going to be a witness in a case, to be involved in to get a protective order against someone who has been violent. You know, if people are not feeling safe being part of the criminal justice process, showing up to court, then we have less safe communities. This goes to what Erin said earlier about trust policies, right, and sanctuary policies. what I also think is really exciting is for states to now, like with the reopening of refugee, we really hope we'll see the reopening of the refugee system, and states are refugee resettlement agencies are going to need support, not just from the federal level, but from the state level. This is an opportunity to create new and welcoming communities for refugees and really look at every policy that can become a welcoming policy to support refugees and immigrants, obviously. And when you do that, you really serve the receiving community. And so I think there's the sky is the limit with state and local policies. One thing that I would like to see post-COVID as well is let's look at these unemployment policies that exclude immigrants from unemployment insurance. That is ridiculous. People are paying into the system, and it's ridiculous to include or exclude someone because of their immigration status. So much there. And for more, we have a state and local newsletter at Clinic, and I have a colleague who works on state and local issues. She works directly with the state Catholic conferences to support them with state and local matters. But I could talk all night about what can be done at the state and local level.
Thank you so much. I wish we had all night to talk about that. Erin, I'm wondering if we could talk a little bit about the impact of COVID on an already backlogged immigration court system and what a Biden administration might be able to do to help alleviate that, and because of the disastrous, horrendous impact it has on so many members of our community languishing in this immigration court system.
Yeah, so there are at this point more than 1.2 million cases in the immigration court system. And these backlogs have been growing for years now and have just gotten worse under the Trump administration. Unfortunately, COVID has made them even worse because the number of courts, including the court in New York City, which some people slightly outside of Fairfield County, do go to, in Westchester, end up going to. We have seen that that court, for instance, remains closed due to the threat of COVID because a lot of these courts are small office buildings, essentially, with cramped conditions, and it's just not safe to have people together, and in fact could potentially violate local health ordinances. So the immigration court backlog is just growing and growing and growing. And while, what I always say about backlogs is delay helps some people's cases and it hurts other people's cases. There's a lot of people with really straightforward ways to remain in the United States, to get a green card, to find some way to get out of this painful limbo that they've been in and get on that path to citizenship, who are just stuck and have no way to move forward. And meanwhile, there are undocumented immigrants who don't have a path forward, who are able to remain in the United States for years and years and years because of these backlogs. So that's why I say it sometimes hurts and helps, because it's a system that sort of doesn't really work right now. So unfortunately, getting out of these backlogs is going to be tough. And I think one of the main ways that the administration can do this is by simply dismissing hundreds of thousands of cases. Under the Obama administration, we actually saw efforts in 2014 to 2016 to use prosecutorial discretion to resolve cases for people who were not enforcement priorities. As Jill was talking about earlier, these priorities that the Trump administration got rid of. Well, under the Obama administration, more than almost 90,000 people or more who were in immigration court were essentially allowed to just stay because the administration said, you're not a priority, we're just going to close your case. And I would love to see a new administration find ways to get rid of this backlog by just going through this 1.2 million cases and saying, we are never going to get through these under any current way. And if Congress doesn't do, now if Congress steps in and Congress provides some form of immigration reform and a path to citizenship, that's the best way to do it. But given the current state of the Congress, I'm not really sure that's going to happen. And so without Congress, the Biden administration could do exactly what the Obama administration did and move to dismiss or administratively close tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of cases to reduce these backlogs. Because of COVID, they are just getting worse. And I don't see any sign until we have a vaccine, for instance, for courts to reopen safely and go through the same numbers that they have seen since then. Many courts in this country are open right now, but they're only hearing small numbers of cases a day. They're not hearing the vast majority of cases. So I think it's going to require some really inventive thinking to just implement these new priorities and just basically find a way to clear these cases off the docket without forcing people to wait 4 years to see a judge.
Thank you. Daniel, I don't know what we're at in terms of time.
I think we can go a few minutes longer. There's one question here on an area of immigration law that the general public is not really familiar with, which is special immigrant juveniles, or SIJ. And this is a form of protection for immigrants who are lacking the protection of one or both of their parents. And the question is there some legislation that should be considered that would make the process for SIJs more straightforward or easier to adjudicate?
Yeah, there are a number of proposals, I think, to protect special juvenile status in Congress right now, though, of course, as previously, I don't know how many proposals are actually going to make it through Congress right now. I see this in the Q&A here. There was the further question about sort of limiting federal interference with juvenile status. And I know that's something the clinic does a ton of work on. And I think it's just a matter of eliminating some terrible new federal policies, but Jill knows more than me.
Yeah, I defer to, well, my colleagues at clinic. Michelle Mendez leads our Defending Vulnerable Populations team, and they're really, they have their finger on the pulse of SIJ, and they will be presenting their recommendations to the Biden administration on how to strengthen the program. One thing that, going back to the state and local initiatives, is one thing that people can work on at the state level, of course, is raising the age for SIJ. Michelle, as I mentioned, my colleague worked on several initiatives, one here in Maryland where I live, but also she and my other colleague worked to raise the age threshold in Colorado. And we're using those experiences to then benchmark and work with state Catholic conferences and other state level advocates to make that widespread until we can change the statute, until we can change things more at a federal, at a higher, in a more universal way. We really encourage states to try to make that effort to increase the age limitation on SIJ. But yeah, I think there's the structural issues with SIJ are mainly going to have to come through legislative fixes. Some of it we will be able to manage through some systemic agency fixes, but that's just nuancing. I think we're really looking for structural change. And I agree with Erin. Unfortunately, I don't think that we're going to have the most hospitable environment in Congress for big legislative change in terms of immigration legislation, unfortunately.
Then maybe one final question, and I want to thank our panelists for running over time. This has been a fascinating discussion, but and it goes to money as well. USCIS has got budget problems. We have, hundreds of thousands of very straightforward, immigration benefit applications, naturalizations, green cards that are languishing because of lack of people and all sorts of funny rules. And can it be fixed? Does it take a lot of money, or will it will those fee increases go into effect? Is there a solution for making USCIS a better organization?
I'm going to touch on 3 quick points, and then Aaron's probably going to close us off with his amazing wisdom that he always. Number 1, we didn't have to be here. It was because the Trump administration decided to change policies in chaos and make an already, backlogged organization or agency worse, right? So it exacerbated the rapid policy change that creates very high adjudication standards, this extreme vetting, et cetera, that they have employed. Number 1 can be rolled back. It's going to take some time, but we can do it, and we can make this agency an operating efficiently machine. Again, we can do it. The Congress has already provided USCIS a critical tool in getting itself back into better fiscal shape, which is the stopgap funding through the expansion of the premium processing program that can provide additional revenues to the agency. And all we need is someone who will lead that agency with responsibility and fiduciary duty, and will actually use the tools that Congress just gave them to increase revenue. Number 3, that fee rule will never see the light of day. That's my projection.
Yeah, I agree that particular fee rule will never see the light of day, just because it's not that USCIS doesn't need money, and it's not that, I would just say increasing fees will have to happen eventually. I think everybody agrees. It's just that particular fee rule, which would have done things like eliminate fee waivers, charge over $1,000 to become a US citizen, charge a $50 fee to apply for asylum, the first, making us 1 in 4 countries in the world to charge for asylum. That fee rule, that's dead. That's not going to happen under the new administration. But there will likely be in the future a new fee rule built on better principles that still respects the fact that some people need income support, some people will need fee waivers, and that better compensates for the real things that need to be done, rather than the administration's attempt to make legal immigration harder. So that said, we can also hope potentially that Congress maybe steps in with some emergency funding. Keeping the legal immigration system from collapsing is one of the things that is actually still bipartisan. There is support from Republicans to make sure that people are still able to become citizens, for instance, and 12 to 24 month backlogs in citizenship don't help anybody. So we can hope that not only will there be a new fee rule that's sensible and humane and protects access to benefits to low-income immigrants, but also that maybe, just maybe, Congress steps in and gives them a one-time emergency infusion. It's not the first time it's happened. Congress has in the past, I think, stepped in and provided, in some rare circumstances, some additional support to USCIS, but we should push forward, and that's something to talk to your representatives about. The agency needs money desperately, and so if you can reach out to your representatives and say that you would support them providing money to USCIS on a temporary basis, that's something that I think that representatives would like to hear.
So thank you. One lesson that I can take away from tonight is that all of us who work with the immigrant community and are concerned with them are very, very fortunate to have advocates like you, Joe Marie, and Aaron in your organization's clinic, and AIC, and leading, the fight for policy change. I'm optimistic that we can make things happen, and the organizations that are here in Fairfield County, SERI, Building One Community, Catholic Charities, the ALA chapter, other organizations that are involved with immigrants. We have our work cut out for us, but we also have a very, very bright future ahead of us. So I want to thank you all for your time. We've run over. If there are questions that we did not get to, I will try to make sure that they get answered from people who put them in, either in the chat box or in the Q&A. And again, thanks to everybody for your time tonight. Alicia, Jill Marie, Aaron, Adriana, Peter, and to all our audience, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you all.
everyone.
Yeah.
Thanks. Thank you.